laid everything out. They talked about what they were facing, and in their next response, I heard them say, they've not lost their fight, and they don't know how to give up. So make no mistake, they are and we are still in the fight. Iowa's like no other place. We adapt, we solve, and we excel in very difficult times. And there's no doubt in my mind that we'll recover as a state, and Iowans will rebound stronger than ever. I want to just recognize the quick actions of our first responders, our city and county leaders, our elected officials, of volunteers, and our state agency team members at the State Emergency Operations Center. It was amazing. I had the commissioner and the director traveling with me both on Sunday as well as yesterday, and they would back up, I think, the stories and what we saw and what I heard. But these individuals, both at the local level and at the state level, and just volunteers, have been working around the clock to keep Iowans safe. So I really commend all the individuals on their immediate responses, the seamless coordination, and really the ongoing collaboration to address the severe flooding. I'll give you a little bit about the timeline, and then maybe some questions that we're hearing on why this flooding is so significant. So on Monday, March 12th, we had our initial coordination call with the National Weather Service. By Wednesday, we were moving and staging materials and homeland emergency management resources. We started that with previous floods, and it's been a really important aspect, I think, of being ready and prepared. On Thursday, March 14th, I signed a disaster proclamation for the state of Iowa, and we stood up the SEOC. As of today, we have 41 Iowa counties that are eligible for Iowa Individual Assistance and State Resources because they've been designated a disaster county. Some of the questions on why the flooding has been so significant, it actually was a perfect storm. We had record wetness across Nebraska, fifth worst in 124 years. We had the bomb cycle, low pressure that triggered intense snow and rain. That happened on Thursday. Increased runoff because the ground was still frozen. We had extremely low temperatures, and then we rapidly warmed up. We had a lot of unregulated tributaries that flowed into the Missouri, especially the Platte and the Elkhorn rivers in Nebraska. We had preliminary estimates that indicated it was flowing at 300,000 cubic feet per second into the Missouri River, and that caused record flows south of Council Bluffs. That has, compromised every single levee from Council Bluffs all the way down to the Missouri border. So they have been compromised significantly. We are continuing to work with local officials to assess the flood damage. We'll be taking additional action in the days and weeks ahead. I've said over and over, this is all hands on deck, federal, state, and local. I have been in contact with the White House. I'll be meeting with Vice President Pence later this afternoon, where we'll do a flyover of the Missouri. We're also monitoring the Mississippi with the Missouri, and I'll be doing that with Governor Ricketts. I have had Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue reach out to me. Linda McMahon, a small business administrator, has also reached out. We'll be talking to her this afternoon. Secretary of Transportation Elaine Chao reached out yesterday or this morning, so we'll be visiting with her, as well as the FEMA Acting Director Pete Gaynor. Really, our message is, again, this needs to be a coordinated effort. We need to cut through the red tape. We need to eliminate bureaucracy. We need to apply common sense practices. We need to do everything that we can to shoot for early release of funds and support from the federal level. I've asked directly for significant assistance from the Army Corps of Engineers to make sure that it's timely, coordinated, technical expertise, and just again to maybe utilize some of the current maintenance funding that can be redirected. Early release of emergency relief funding for the U.S. Department of Transportation for Federal Highway Administration for our highways, and then of course agricultural funding and support for the loss of, we've seen the loss of stored grain. We have all of our bins and elevators are full of grain. This is typically the time they start to move it. And so tremendous loss there, and as well as livestock. And then what do we need to do as farmers ramp up to put in the new crops for next year? It's important also, I have been in constant contact with Governor Ricketts that we look at this from a regional perspective, so that we're putting in place really the strategy to address the tremendous amount of road damage and, again, impact to our agricultural industry. At the state level, I'll be meeting with my cabinet to seamlessly continue response and damage assessments to lay the groundwork for an aggressive recovery strategy, whether that's infrastructure. We have secondary roads that are in horrific condition because of the wet weather, and so we'll be addressing that. We've got water and sewer treatment centers that have been compromised and impacted. We'll be looking at housing recovery assistance, Main Street businesses, recovery and stability there, agriculture industry support, and again, getting farmers back in the fields.
Sorry about the
This
delay.
morning,
Alice is going to be down in just a second. In fact, she was coming down the stairs just after me. Things are moving fast, so even the media release we're about to give you is a little bit outdated. So, and that was just finished 30 minutes ago. So, Alice is going to let you know what's going on. Once she gets out here, I'm going to lay down some ground rules and let you know about the time and so forth. In the meantime, if you've got any cell phones that are turned on, let's put them into silent mode so that we don't disturb anyone else trying to get good audio of this.
Really, it is a partnership with the entities that I just listed above. So we're seeing that happen. We're seeing a lot of coordination, and we just need to stay vigilant, and that's what I've seen from Iowans.
She was following me down the stairs, so I think the one thing we're waiting on is an easel. We've got a visual that shows what the tank farm is. So for you guys on camera, you might want.
I'll turn it over to Director Flynn, who will give you some more updates. Joyce?
Thank you, Governor. Good morning. From the State Emergency Operations Center perspective, we do have key state agency partners in to help coordinate and effectively get resources to where they're needed. We work with the county emergency managers in each county, and our job is to support them and make sure they're getting the resources they need to both respond to and recover from the incidents that are impacting them. As the governor said, seeing this from the air especially, it is truly catastrophic. I flew in 2011, and there is no comparison between 2011 and now. So our job is, as she said, to dig in, make sure we're getting the resources to where they're needed so that Iowans can recover as quickly as possible. Thank you.
So we'll open it up for questions.
Will you ask the Vice President for an immediate federal declaration? I know that the Nebraska has been
Yep, and we'll do the same thing, but in the interim, Joyce, we're continuing to work with emergency managers and agencies across the state so that we're capturing and starting to assess the damage. I have no doubt that we will qualify for a presidential disaster declaration. We need to have the information and the assessment in place to just make sure that we're getting that documented, and they're doing a really good job of that, even with everything that's going on. But as I said earlier, we want to see what we can do to expedite the funding to make sure that we can get that in place and start to alleviate some of the concerns and questions that communities and farmers and Iowans have all across the state.
You mentioned, Governor, the need to cut through the red tape.
Yeah.
Just to make sure I understand what if you have any particular concerns about
Well,
that.
I don't want to hear things like we'll study that for 3 years or we're going to do. We have to, think about strategically how we address this. And that means you look at the short term, what we can do. That's why we're bringing in the state agencies. When I talk about so that's on our piece, but even from the federal level, let's figure out ways to be innovative, to get this done, to attack it from a 6-month perspective and then maybe a long term. What are those tributary, what are the tiebacks? I can never remember that. Thank you. That was one of the things that we heard as we met with, especially down in Hamburg. So we need to fix those first and then focus on the levee structures that have been compromised or breached. So, it's going to take some time. It's wet. The soil is different in different places, so there's a strategy on how we attack that. But just to also apply, some common sense procedures when we're doing that and moving forward. And let's figure out how we get it done and not, in the short term.
You mentioned the Mississippi,
Mhm.
so you alluded to the fact that this is kind of only the beginning as far as flooding. What kind of process
Well, they're in place, and we saw that actually last spring when we saw the flooding. You know, the monitors. It's been too long. The gauges. Oh, it's been a long 2 days, but those have been just phenomenal. And we actually have more gauges in place than a lot of the other states do. And we've been purposeful about putting those in, and that really allows us to do the modeling that we need. And I think that was instrumental last year, especially when we were dealing with the Mississippi and the impact that would have on Cedar Rapids in that area, and just being prepared with the communities up and down the area that's impacted by the flow of the Mississippi. So we'll continue monitoring that. We just have a tremendous amount of flooding even that's happening in state. I mean, look at where the 41 counties are at. So we'll also be touring those communities later this week to make sure that we're understanding what their needs are, what they're dealing with, making sure they're getting the resources that they need as well. I get a situation report every day from the CEOC, which really is a brief recap of what the new requests are coming in from counties across the state, what the anticipated weather is going forward, and how we can continue to be ready. So all of that is going on. It typically melts, I think, a little slower on the Mississippi side than it does on the Missouri side. So, but I just can't stress enough. And people that have dealt with this before, especially along the Missouri, we're in for the long haul. We're just getting started. We really haven't seen the snowmelt yet that will impact it. And just the spring rains that we're going to get. So what typically would be handled by the levee system that's in place, because they've been compromised, it's going to be, could potentially be a difficult situation all through the spring and summer. No, and I said we're not going to have any trouble, I don't think, meeting the requirement for the federal declaration, but they are still coming in. I had a farmer reach out to me yesterday around the Hamburg area. I mean, the amount of grain that's in the bins and in the elevators is just significant. I think he talked to 10 farmers, and they alone had 750,000 bushels, and there are still bins that are splitting and dumping and elevators that were full. So, a lot of those aren't insured. So that's what I talked to Sonny Perdue about. That has to be a part of the conversation that we have going forward. Especially, they've taken out loans. They're trying to get ready to put new crop in the fields, and so that's going to have a significant impact. Also, what we're dealing with down in the Hamburg area, it was brought to our attention, the loss of hogs. There were some hog farms down there, and just with the 10 that they know of, there are about 25,000 hogs that we'll have to figure out how to, just get rid of. So, and these are just honestly probably some of the tip of the iceberg of what we're hearing. So assessments are still coming in.
So what's the aid look like? What's the federal? Is it money,
well,
resources?
It's
what
both.
kinds
So
of things are we looking at as far as? And I'm thinking of the agricultural community as far as the grain bins, what just.
So, and Secretary Nag is a part of this also. So he has the opportunity. There's some disaster relief that's available, I think, from USDA. That's Secretary Perdue was one of the reasons he reached out. We need to see what it is and then figure out what's available. But for instance, with other disasters that we've gone through, there's public infrastructure dollars that are available. So that's one component. We will have no trouble. Director Lowe can talk about that if you want some specifics, probably needing that, and then being creative and innovative how we can pull together like we did with the floods of 2011 with a very condensed timeline, because it's set for so long, 4 months, and then they went from the beginning of the incident. So we really, kudos to them for really getting that done in a timely manner so we could receive funding. So there's the public infrastructure side, and then there's the individual assistance. So that is sometimes a little bit more difficult to reach that, but I don't know. Do you have anything to add to that side of it?
I will just quickly say on the public assistance side from the federal government, as a state, we have to reach $4.5 million in damages, and that's roads, bridges, critical infrastructure. So I don't have a concern. I can't say for sure. We've got to gather the numbers.